Hello, thanks for jumping in on this quick video. I just want to spend some time talking about women in leadership. This really wasn't a topic that I thought much about at all. And then earlier this month, I was asked to present at OPEX Week, Business Transformation World Summit, with the Women in Leadership Breaking Through the Glass Ceiling topic. And it made me start to think, what has my journey been? And how can I use my journey to help other women in their journey? Whether you're just starting out in the workplace, or maybe you've been there for a while and you're encountering some issues, or perhaps you want to accelerate your career to get to a certain place by a certain time, avoiding wasting time, wasting money, wasting effort. So maybe this can help. I hope you will spend some time with me to talk about women in leadership breaking through the glass ceiling. Okay, I will share my screen. All right, my name is Dr. Deborah Dean. So a little bit about me is I started working what I'll call my real job in 1993. I started working actually when I was about 12 years old, but my first office job, I'll say, was in 1993, and I actually took two. As a high school student, we were eligible for internships, so I applied to several, and I took two. One was with a health insurance company, and one was with a car dealership, a luxurious car dealership. So we'll talk about that a bit more later. In 1994, I graduated from high school. And, you know, if you're new in the workforce, or maybe you have kids that are in middle school or high school, I sure hope they're doing this better than they used to. But it was towards the end of my senior year, and I remember my guidance counselor asking me, what do I want to do after high school? And that is a really late conversation to have my senior year of high school. So hopefully we're doing that sooner these days. I didn't know the answer to that question. So in 1995, shortly after I graduated, I was married and had my first daughter. In 1997, I was pregnant again. I had left my my workplace, which was actually one of the original internships. I left there in 95 or 97, was pregnant with my second child and looking for work. So, you know, that was one of those moments like, probably shouldn't have done that, but that's where I was. And as one of the main breadwinners in the family, I needed work. So I remember having lots and lots of good interviews, but I didn't tell them ahead of time I was pregnant. Legally, we don't have to, right? However, when I showed up in my suit and full of my resume with all my qualifications and such, the interview went well, but I never heard from them again, except for one. So one person hired me at 8 months pregnant. This is one of her claims to fame, and she said that she could see my potential, so she knew I would be gone a short time and I would return and would be a great hire. So thanks to her, I was hired. Unfortunately, my marriage didn't last. So in 2002, I remarried. I actually got divorced in 99, then remarried in 2002. In 2003, 2005, I earned a couple of degrees. And thankfully, I had a very supportive husband that was willing to help me out with my education. 2008, I had my first son. So this time, I am married with my second marriage. I have 2 daughters from my previous marriage. My husband has 2 children from his previous marriage. And we have our son in 2008. We actually were also pregnant in 2005 and lost that baby when we were about 5 months pregnant. So we are a family of 6. Let's see, 2009, the recession hit. And although I had worked for the same company for 11 years, the office was closing in the state where we lived. So I was faced with, again, being the sole breadwinner of the family. Where do I go to work, and how fast can I get there? I needed money. So in 2009, we relocated to a different state. And unfortunately, my family split. So a couple of kids stayed in one state, and we moved with a couple of kids to another state. 2016, I was nominated as a top female leader. I honestly didn't even know that was a thing, but it was, and so that was nice. 2017, I earned another degree, and in 2018, I launched my own business. So that's the quick overview of my journey. Let's look at my timeline with my career. So some of the business positions that I had, the job titles. Early in my career, I started with new business and underwriting. Actually, that was one job, but two titles, new business and underwriting. About once a year, I would promote into a new position, so shortly moved into customer service. My third position was actually a combination of things. I was relationship manager, project manager, and operations analyst all in one. And then I moved into a business analyst role once I relocated during the recession. Shortly thereafter, became the manager of quality assurance, and then the operations manager and director of business transformation, and now president and CEO. So you can see that I've homegrown, just started with an entry-level position and moved my way right up through the company, climbing the corporate ladder. It has not been easy though. So if you can learn from other people, I highly recommend it. Just if you would stay with this webinar, and if I can help you after this, just learn from other people that have already blazed the trail. It may help to avoid some heartache and some headache. So part of my journey included sexual harassment. And, you know, back in the 90s, we didn't really think a whole lot about this. It was just kind of commonplace where men would make comments. I remember walking down the street and guys would whistle, or in my first situation in the workplace, this was at that car dealership, and we went to the Christmas party. So here I am, a senior in high school, my little red sequin dress, going to a Christmas party with a bunch of car salesmen. I should have had some sort of notice sent to me to say, bad idea, but I did it. And needless to say, it didn't turn out well. So after that, once I returned to work as the receptionist, the guys would linger at my desk. They would make rude comments. So I eventually left that dealership shortly after the Christmas party. Then later in my corporate career, actually a few times, I had one guy, when I was traveling quite a bit, he would just stare at me very intensely. And again, it wasn't something that I really paid attention to. I sort of keep my head down and just do my work. But other people were noticing. And they said it was making them uncomfortable, which then after I realized what was happening, it made me uncomfortable. So I went to HR. They ended up having a talk with the guy, sending him through some classes, and that seemed to stop. And then another situation, kind of similar, one of the guys would linger around my desk, make some comments, just stare at me from a distance. And so he actually left the company on his own, but when he wanted to return, the hiring manager came to me and asked, they were aware of the situation, and asked if I would be uncomfortable if he returned. So different situations, all handled very differently, but the main point is it happened. I think the world we live in today is a little bit different in how we, as women, don't allow those sorts of things to happen, period, or we don't allow them to happen as often or for as long as what I allowed it to happen. So main thing there is have boundaries and speak up. Working harder than those around me. So as a young lady starting in the workplace, I always felt like I needed to prove myself. My mother told me, work for the job you want, not for the job you have. Same thing, dress for the job you want, not for the job you have. So I would dress up, I would be prepared, I would always show up early, leave late. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew I could do the job just as well as anybody else in the company. And honestly, I wasn't thinking I could do the job better than a man. I was just thinking I needed to do the best job that I could so I could move up in the company. But I felt this need to prove myself. And I started to keep a list, basically, of all the great things that I had done. So projects I had worked on, or how much money I saved the company, or how much business I had conserved, those sorts of things. Empty promises. So as a young lady starting in the workplace, I started my education in 1999, and I had asked my boss if the company would pay for it. I knew the company had paid for her education. I was told, I think, that yeah, the company would pay for my education. Shortly after I started, though, that wasn't the case. So I should have got that in writing. And they did pay some, but definitely not all. Management positions, there was a time, actually there were several times where I was promised different positions and they just didn't happen. Unfortunately, the big one for me was traveling for about 6 months. So leaving my little kids to go and travel during the work week, come home on the weekend to my family, go back on Monday. I did that for about 6 months and was promised a management position out of that. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And then job titles, lots and lots and lots of different job titles. You noticed I would do multiple jobs at once, so wearing different hats. But also, what really started to, I guess, frustrate me was later in my career, once I became a manager and started to see what other people made, how much money they made, and started to see how people could come into the company and make more money than me. And they had zero experience with the company, less education, but they were making more money than me. And so once I asked my director, could I get a different job title? Because I was looking for a different job, but unfortunately I couldn't basically qualify for a higher level position because I didn't have the management title. Although I had been doing it for years, I just had a senior business analyst title, unfortunately. And the guys that did the same work with me, they already had manager or supervisor titles. So a little bit frustrating there. And when I asked for the different title, I wasn't given it. It took quite a bit of time still before I was able to get the title that I deserved. And then some managers just didn't care. What I found often was if my manager was single or didn't have kids, they often just didn't understand. So if I needed to take time off because my children were sick or we had some activity to go to, they didn't understand why I needed to leave. And I didn't do this often. I was definitely one that always worked her time, and I was in the office more often than not. Once we were able to VPN and work from home, it seemed like that was all that I did. I definitely had a difficult time balancing work and life. All right. So breaking into the Good Old Boys Club. I didn't even know this was a thing until I got a mentor later in my career, and he really pointed out that we had this Good Old Boys Club. So unfortunately, it's true. And there was one time when my director and several of the guys that I worked with were heading out of town. They were going to some training in a different state, actually. And I wasn't invited. I wasn't even told about it until the day of. And basically my director said, hey, we're going out of town for this thing. You hold down the fort. And the idea, the impression that I got behind it was I didn't need to do the training. I already knew whatever it was that they needed to do. But keep in mind, I didn't have the same title and I wasn't making the same pay, but they expected me to hold down the fort. So again, a little bit frustrating as the female in the group, and usually I was the only female with a group of men as leaders. they just innately looked at me as being the person that would take notes or have snacks or, organize events or deal with the touchy-feely stuff. So that too was unfortunate. I really was the type of person that thought if I just work hard and stay loyal to the company, things would work out in my favor. My mom just celebrated 40 years with her company, and my grandfather had done the same with the company he was at. So I had been there 21 years and really just thought I'd stay till retirement. But I could tell that things had changed, and I could work as hard as I wanted to, and all I was going to get was more work. So not exactly what I had in mind. The difference in pay, title, and opportunity, that really became obvious to me, like I said, when I started managing others. And as frustrating as it is, the company was just not being rewarding employees for being loyal to the company. If you were brand new off the street, you would make more money than somebody that had been doing the job 5 or 10 years. And that's really sad, but that's the way it was. Some female managers were cutthroat, and I actually heard from another manager that a lot of ladies just think, I didn't have help getting to the position that I'm at, so I'm not going to help anyone else. And I want to make it very clear that that's not me. I do want to help other people, help them get to the position that they want, help them just navigate the corporate landscape as a woman, as a mother, as a new employee, or someone that's been there a long time. So I do want to help with that. And then some managers were worried I would take their job. So, towards the end of my career in the corporate world, I found that I had more education. I had been with the company longer. I knew more people. In fact, in my last position, it was somebody that I knew through networking that basically, I think, told the hiring manager, hire me. So that just made the relationship difficult from the get-go. And then, let's see, I was the only female with a group of men. Usually that was the case. If we went to board meetings, we went to any type of conferences, whether it was in town, out of town, in the office, not in the office, I was often the only female. So thankfully, most of the time that worked out just fine. The men that I traveled with were married, and so they understood if I, took a little bit longer to get ready, or if I, didn't feel like going out to eat or something, things just happen. And even how many bags you carry, it's just funny when you travel with men. Some people carry very little bit of clothes, and, some women carry a lot of clothes and makeup and shoes. I fortunately traveled pretty lightly and was pretty quick at getting ready, so that wasn't usually an issue. But just the issue of even being in a car full of men for hours while you're, traveling from one place to the next, it makes the traveling a little interesting. Okay, so that's my story. I do have some practical tips for you. First and foremost, advocate for yourself. I could work as hard as I wanted to, and no one would notice. I can keep lists of all the great things I do, but no one will notice unless I advocate for myself. So advocate for yourself. Speak up. Do it in a humble way, but speak up and let people know all the great things that you're doing. Establish and hold firm to your boundaries and values. Set boundaries. What will you do? What will you permit? What will you not do? This comes in handy with ethical issues in business just as much as dealing with other people in relationships. Sometimes there may be an issue that arises and you think, no way am I doing that. It's against my value system. It's unethical. It's illegal. It's wrong. So knowing those boundaries up front. Develop a career path. Find a coach or mentor to help you navigate the landscape. So wherever you're at this moment, think 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, where do you want to be? Let's talk about how to accelerate that career path, how to document the career path. What is it that you need to get to where you want to be? How can we do this so that it saves you time, it saves you energy, frustration, money, all those things? Working with a coach and mentor can help greatly with this. Network with men and women that have positions that you want. This is so helpful too. So, so helpful. So again, my mentor years ago had advised me to start networking. And he gave me a few names to get started with. So I would set up meetings like 30 minutes at a time, whether it was in person or on the phone, and just contact them and say, I'd like to meet with you for about 30 minutes. I want to know more about you and your journey. And you kind of have a little informal agenda or list of questions such as, what position do you have? What do you do in that position? How did you get there? What education or certificates or skills did you need to get there? Do you enjoy your work? What are your next steps? What is it that you're planning to do? And then you can ask them if they have any advice for you. And usually they'll ask you, more about you. What are you doing? What's your plan? And by the end of the conversation, they'll have 2 or 3 more names for you to talk to. So keep doing that. Like I said, the first couple of years I did it, I talked to more than 30 people. Keep doing it. Talk to 1 or 2 at least per month. Keep a journal of who you talked to and what they said and their contact information, because you want to stay in touch. Several of those people that I networked with came back to me to either offer me a job, ask for my help with projects, or some sort of relationship that continued. All right, negotiate for yourself. This goes back to number 1, advocate. There's a book called Ask For It by Babcock and LeShever. They wrote it basically for women, but I think it's a good book for men too. They say that 7% of women, only 7%, will negotiate. So let's say you applied for a job, you've had the interview, they come to you and they make an offer. Only 7% of women will counter offer, but 57% of men counter offer. So what does that mean? We're leaving money on the table. And when we start out our career like this, we are constantly falling behind. So when you hear the statistic that women make less money than men, some of this is our own fault, because men innately are negotiating for higher pay way more than women. So we need to do this better. When you do negotiate, always ask for at least 10% more. Get the book and read it. There's a lot of helpful hints. Basically, we need to know what you're worth. So even today, whatever your job title is, Google search what the salary is for that job in your location and see how that compares to your current salary. And then add to that your experience and your education. You need to know your worth. And you don't have to wait until your next promotion to do anything about it. Once you figure out what you're worth, what your value is, go to your current manager and say, hey, I've been doing some research and it looks like I am not getting paid what I should be. How can we make this right? So you get the book, Ask For It. It will greatly help you with those negotiations. Next, let's think long term. I can tell you that after 21 years in the same company, I did not put enough emphasis on my retirement. So let's think long term. And I can tell you that my mother, who has worked for the same company for 40 years, did not put enough emphasis on her retirement. And that's why at 70 years old, she is still working. So don't think, oh, I'm too young to think about retirement. That's a long way off. No, now is the time to think about it. Regardless of your age, regardless of how many years you've worked or you have left to work, we need to think about retirement. Think about your work-life balance. Is it worth spending 10 to 12 hours a day to have the pay that you're getting and neglect your family? Think about your legacy. What are you going to leave? What's your lasting legacy when you leave this position, when you leave the company, when you leave the earth? What are people going to think of you? And stay classy. You know, female managers, in this meeting that we had earlier this month, a lot of people were talking about female managers. A lot of them are nasty or hateful or bossy or the other B word. And we don't have to be. We can still be a great leader. We can still be very high in the organization, even CEO or president, and be a classy lady. And get support. Realize that we can't do this all on our own. So whether it's taking care of our house, running errands, picking up our kids, cooking dinner, anything like that, get help. Or at work, if you have projects or research that needs done, get help. You don't have to do this all on your own. Focus on what you're really good at and get help for the rest. Okay, so I would love to stay connected with you. This is my information. I'd love to stay connected. Just let me know how I can help. Thanks so much and have a great day.